She has no idea about this surprise, and that's the beautiful part, because some of the most meaningful things in life aren't announced. They're felt, they grow quietly in the background, while the world keeps moving, unaware that something sacred is being prepared. This isn't about grand gestures or loud promises. It's about intention, about choosing someone every day in ways they may never see, but will one day feel deeply. Love isn't always fireworks. Sometimes it's patience. Sometimes it's waiting. Sometimes it's holding a moment close to your chest because you want it to land gently when the time is right. She has no idea what's coming, but every step I've taken, every choice I've made, has been carrying her name silently, and today this message isn't about the surprise itself. It's about the love that led to it. She has no idea about this surprise, and that's not because she hasn't been paying attention. It's because some things are meant to live quietly before they arrive. Love doesn't always knock. Sometimes it waits. Sometimes it learns the rhythm of another heart before stepping forward. I've learned that the most meaningful moments don't rush themselves into the light. They sit patiently, growing weight, gathering truth, becoming real enough to last. There's a difference between wanting to impress someone and wanting to protect something precious. When you want to impress, you hurry. When you want to protect, you slow down, you watch, you listen, you let time teach you what words never could. I chose the second path, not because it was easier, but because it felt honest. Because love, when it's real, doesn't need an audience while it's being built. She moves through her days unaware that she is already being carried in mind. In the quiet choices, in the pauses, in the decisions no one sees. Love doesn't announce itself when it's deep. It becomes part of how you breathe, part of how you stand a little straighter, part of how you stop settling for less than what you know you're capable of becoming. I didn't wake up one day and decide this. It happened slowly, in moments that didn't feel important at the time, in conversations that lingered longer than expected, in silences that felt comfortable instead of heavy. That's how you know. Not when your heart races, but when it rests. She has no idea about the nights when I chose patience over impulse, the moments when I could have spoken but didn't, because timing matters when something matters. Love isn't about saying everything the moment you feel it. It's about knowing when saying it will land with care instead of confusion. There's a strength in restraint that people don't talk about enough. It takes courage to hold something good without rushing to prove it. It takes maturity to trust that what's meant to last doesn't need to be forced into existence. I wanted this to be solid before it was visible. I wanted it to be true before it was loud. Every surprise rooted in love begins long before the reveal. It begins in discipline, in becoming someone worthy of the moment you're preparing. Because love isn't just about what you give another person, it's about who you become in the process of choosing them. She doesn't know that she's been the quiet standard in my mind, the reminder to be better, to be calmer, to be more present. Not because she asked for it, but because loving someone makes you see your own rough edges clearly. And when you care deeply, you don't hide from that reflection. You work with it. There were days when the surprise felt heavy to carry alone, when silence felt louder than words, but even then I knew why I was holding it. Some things are meant to arrive whole, not leaked in pieces. Love deserves that respect. I've learned that real affection isn't dramatic, it's consistent. It shows up even when no one is watching. It stays even when it's inconvenient. It doesn't disappear when it has to wait. If anything, waiting refines it. Strips away what's unnecessary. Leaves only what's real. She has no idea that this surprise was shaped by listening more than speaking, by understanding more than assuming, by choosing depth over display. There's a quiet joy in knowing you're building something meaningful without needing validation for it. Yet, love changes how you see time. It makes you patient without making you passive. It teaches you that anticipation isn't suffering when it's anchored in purpose. That preparation can be an act of devotion. I didn't plan this surprise to shock her. I planned it to honor her, to reflect the care she deserves, to arrive not as a performance, but as a truth revealed. Because surprises rooted in love shouldn't feel confusing. They should feel inevitable, like something her heart already knew before her mind caught up. She doesn't know how many small moments contributed to this, how many quiet confirmations added up, how many times I chose to keep moving forward even when the path wasn't clear. Love doesn't always give you certainty. Sometimes it gives you direction and asks you to trust the R.S. There's something sacred about preparing joy for someone without them knowing. It teaches humility. You're not doing it for praise. You're doing it because love, when it's genuine, wants to give without keeping score. I've learned that the strongest surprises aren't about the moment they're revealed. They're about the foundation beneath them. If the foundation is steady, the moment doesn't have to be perfect, it just has to be real. She has no idea that this surprise carries every unspoken promise I chose not to rush, every intention I let mature, every part of me that learned to slow down because something worth keeping was ahead. Love isn't fragile when it's built this way. It's patient, it's grounded, it knows how to wait without fading. And when the time comes, it doesn't explode. It settles in like it always belonged there, like it had been there all along, quietly becoming, steadily growing, holding its shape through every silent step, through every decision made without applause, through every moment where restraint felt heavier than expression, through every day that asked for faith instead of proof, through every breath that carried her presence without her knowing, through every choice that leaned toward permanence instead of impulse, through every pause that taught me that some things are most powerful when they arrive without warning, when they step into the light already complete, already steady, already true, already carrying the weight of everything that came before, everything that was protected, everything that was chosen, everything that was held carefully, so that when it finally stands in front of her, it won't need explanation, it won't need offense, it won't need urgency. It will simply exist as what it has always been, waiting, grounded, certain, shaped by time, shaped by intention, shaped by a love that learned how to stay quiet long enough to become something that doesn't disappear when the moment passes, something that doesn't rush to finish, something that continues to unfold even as it is finally seen, even as it is finally shared, even as the silence that protected it begins to lift, even as the surprise moves from preparation into presence, carrying with it every reason I chose to wait, every reason I chose to believe, every reason I chose to build instead of announce, every reason I chose love that knows how to stand still without losing its strength. When devotion grows quietly, it doesn't ask to be noticed. It doesn't look for proof that it exists. It doesn't measure itself by reactions or responses. It just keeps showing up, steady and unshaken, doing the work that love does best when no one is watching. She has no idea how much of this has been happening in silence, and that's intentional. Because devotion that needs to be seen is still learning what it is. Devotion that stays quiet already knows. I've come to understand that the loudest things in life don't always last. Noise fades, applause ends, but what's built carefully, without rush, without pressure, carries a different kind of weight. It settles into time instead of fighting it. That's how this devotion grew, not from a single moment, but from repetition, from choosing again and again, even when it would have been easier not to, especially when it would have been easier not to. She doesn't know that every ordinary day became a place where devotion practiced itself, in patience, in restraint, in learning when to step forward and when to step back. Love isn't proven in declarations, it's proven in consistency, in being the same person when emotions rise and when they fall, in staying grounded when excitement wants to rush ahead of wisdom. There's a kind of strength that only comes from staying quiet about what matters most. It teaches you how to carry something precious without squeezing it too tightly, how to protect without hiding, how to care without controlling. Devotion that grows this way doesn't burn fast. It warms slowly. It becomes dependable. It becomes something you can lean on without fear that it will disappear when conditions change. She has no idea how many times devotion asked me to be better before asking me to be bold. It required honesty with myself first. It required facing my own impatience, my own need for reassurance, my own desire to be seen. Loving quietly strips those things down. It forces you to ask whether you're giving for the right reasons, whether you're choosing someone because it feels good in the moment or because it feels right in the long run. I learned that devotion doesn't rush toward expression. It deepens inward first. It becomes part of how you think, how you decide, how you carry yourself. It shows up in how you listen more than how you speak, in how you notice what matters to her even when she never says it out loud, in how you remember the small details because they reveal the bigger picture. When devotion grows quietly, it doesn't compete with the world. It doesn't feel threatened by distractions. It doesn't demand constant confirmation. It stands still, confident in its place. That kind of devotion isn't shaken by time apart or silence between words. It understands that connection isn't always measured by proximity. Sometimes it's measured by alignment. She doesn't know how often devotion taught me to wait, not because I was unsure, but because timing is a form of respect. Love that lasts understands timing. It doesn't arrive early and overwhelm. It doesn't arrive late and apologize. It arrives when the moment can hold it. Waiting isn't absence of action. It's action guided by care. Quiet devotion sharpens awareness. You begin to notice how someone carries joy, how they carry stress, how they move through uncertainty. You learn when to offer support and when to offer space. You stop trying to be impressive and start trying to be reliable. That shift changes everything. Reliability doesn't fade. It builds trust without announcing itself. She has no idea that devotion has already changed me. Not dramatically, not overnight, but in ways that last. It taught me to slow my reactions, to weigh my words, to consider impact instead of intention alone. Because loving someone quietly makes you responsible for the effect you have on them, even when they don't know you're trying. There's a discipline in quiet devotion that few people talk about. It's the discipline of staying aligned with your values when emotions fluctuate, of choosing respect even when desire wants immediacy, of holding back not because you're afraid, but because you're certain enough to wait. Devotion like this doesn't disappear when circumstances shift. It adapts, it remains, it doesn't cling, it doesn't chase, it trusts its own depth. That's why it lasts louder than words ever could, because words can promise anything. Devotion proves only what it can sustain. She doesn't know how often devotion chose silence over explanation, not because there was nothing to say, but because some truths don't need to be spoken repeatedly to stay true. Repetition doesn't strengthen devotion. Action does. Presence does. Integrity does. I've learned that quiet devotion teaches humility. You stop centering yourself in the story. You stop measuring what you're getting back. You give because giving aligns with who you want to be, not because you're keeping score. That kind of giving doesn't exhaust you. It steadies you. There's something grounding about loving without broadcasting it. It keeps the relationship between intention and action clean, uncomplicated. You're not performing, you're participating, you're not convincing, you're committing. She has no idea how many choices devotion has influenced without her name ever being spoken in those moments. Decisions about direction, about patience, about growth. When devotion is real, it becomes a compass. It doesn't dictate every step, but it quietly points you toward what matters. Quiet devotion also teaches you to be alone without being lonely. Because when you're building something meaningful, solitude feels purposeful instead of empty. You're not waiting in absence, you're preparing in presence. That changes how time feels. It slows it down in a good way. I've seen how devotion that grows quietly doesn't panic when things feel uncertain. It doesn't need guarantees. It needs alignment, it needs honesty, it needs space to breathe. And when it has that, it becomes resilient. She doesn't know that devotion has already forgiven things that were never spoken, that it has already chosen understanding over assumption, that it has already decided to stay open instead of defensive. Quiet devotion resolves conflicts before they ever become visible. There's a maturity that comes from loving this way. You stop chasing intensity and start valuing depth. You stop mistaking urgency for importance. You stop confusing attention with connection. Those lessons don't shout. They settle. Devotion that grows quietly isn't fragile. It doesn't crack under pressure. It bends without breaking. It listens without losing itself. It holds space without erasing boundaries. That balance takes time. It takes intention. It takes care. She hasn't idea how carefully devotion has been shaped. How often it was examined, adjusted, strengthened. Not to make it perfect, but to make it honest. Perfection can't last. Honesty can. Quiet devotion respects the future. It doesn't spend everything in the present moment. It saves, it invests. It thinks beyond now. That's why when it finally speaks, it doesn't need many words. Its history carries the message. I've learned that devotion doesn't need constant reassurance to stay alive. It needs meaning, it needs purpose, it needs to know why it's here. And when it knows that, it doesn't fade when things get quiet. It deepens. She doesn't know how much devotion has already chosen her without claiming her. How it has honored her autonomy while holding space for connection. That's not distance, that's respect. There's a calm that comes from knowing you're not rushing something fragile, that you're allowing it to become strong before it becomes visible. Quiet devotion lives in that calm. It doesn't fight it. Devotion that grows quietly also teaches you how to let go of outcomes. You stop controlling the ending. You focus on the process. You trust that what's built with care will know how to stand on its own. She has no idea how many moments devotion asked me to be present instead of persuasive, to listen instead of lead, to observe instead of react. Those moments don't look dramatic from the outside, but they change everything on the inside. Quiet devotion becomes part of your character. It doesn't turn on and off. It informs how you treat people, how you handle conflict, how you move through uncertainty. It becomes a way of being, not just a way of loving. I've learned that when devotion grows quietly, it doesn't fear being misunderstood temporarily. It trusts that time will clarify what words cannot. That truth, when lived consistently, eventually speaks for itself. She doesn't know that devotion has already accepted the pace at which things unfold, that it isn't rushing her understanding, that it's allowing her to arrive at her own clarity. Love that lasts doesn't drag, it waits. Quiet devotion doesn't collapse when expectations aren't met immediately. It adjusts, it recalibrates, it remains steady. That steadiness becomes its signature. There's a confidence in devotion that doesn't need to announce itself. It doesn't posture, it doesn't threaten. It simply exists, grounded in choice. Choice repeated enough times becomes commitment. She has no idea how deeply devotion has learned to stay. Not cling, not hover, not demand. Stay, present, attentive, rooted. That kind of staying doesn't exhaust, it strengthens. Devotion that grows quietly also knows when to protect silence. Not everything needs to be shared at once. Not everything benefits from exposure. Some things are meant to mature in private before they meet the world. I've seen how quiet devotion turns patience into power. Waiting becomes an act of love, not a delay. Stillness becomes movement in another direction. Growth happens beneath the surface. She doesn't know that devotion has already imagined the future without forcing it into shape. It's open, it's flexible, it's prepared without being rigid. That openness keeps it alive. Quiet devotion doesn't confuse intensity with depth. It knows that depth is built slowly, layer by layer, through trust, through respect, through presence. And once it's there, it doesn't vanish easily. Devotion that grows quietly lasts louder than words because, when it finally speaks, it doesn't need to convince. It doesn't need to persuade. It carries the weight of everything it has already done, everything it has already chosen, everything it has already held steady through silence, through patience, through moments of uncertainty that never weakened it, only refined it, shaping it into something that doesn't rush to arrive but doesn't hesitate to remain, something that knows how to exist without explanation, how to stand without applause, how to continue unfolding even as it becomes visible, even as it begins to be felt beyond the quiet space where it learned how to grow, even as the silence that protected it slowly gives way to presence, to recognition, to understanding that arrives not as a sudden realization, but as a gentle knowing, a sense that this devotion has been here longer than it was seen, longer than it was named, longer than it was acknowledged, steady and unshaken, still becoming, still choosing, still holding its place as time moves forward without needing to announce where it's going or how it will end, remaining open, grounded, alive, and moving quietly into whatever comes next without losing the depth that made it last.